You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we have another show for y'all. We have two special guests. We have Menelek Lumumba and also Hans Charles. They are the hosts and creators of the podcast, The A Building. First and foremost, I know you both have a great resume, so I don't want to take too much of the time setting up the show, but I want to welcome you both to the show and say good morning. How y'all doing?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time. Let's get to business because this takes back in 1969, a group of Morehouse College students held a Board of Trustees hostage for 2 days. We got to get right on to this, so I'll just start with Menelek. Tell us a little bit about why this podcast is not just necessary, but also informative for the listeners.
Well, I mean, Hans and I have been talking about this story as long as we've known each other. We met 20 years ago when we were at film school at Howard, and it's one of these stories that's kind of legend when it comes to HBCU folklore. 1969, a group of students at Morehouse College took over a Board of Trustees meeting about 6 months after the assassination of Dr. King. And one of the students was Sam Jackson, one of the hostages was Martin Luther King Sr. And they wanted essentially Morehouse to upgrade and to enter the conversation in terms of curriculum, in terms of student services. And this was a moment to take advantage of that. And by telling the story in this medium, in the audio form, we're able to kind of trace the moment and protest of that time to 1969 all the way up to today and some of the issues we're dealing with when it comes to protests at a large scale right now.
And Hans, with your visual storytelling experience, I mean, you know your credentials are super amazing. When you look at how audio-driven podcasts is something that is not going to be, going away. It's here to stay. How did your experience with film also help influence this whole project?
That's a great question. I mean, when we were considering doing this as an audio project, 'cause we initially thought of it as a documentary, Menelek was the one who sort of had to convince me that doing it as an audio doc was actually going to be more freeing. Because there are certain rules in cinema that we wouldn't have to adhere to, and that we could really delve into the story much deeper. And the truth is, sonically, audio is what we call a hot medium. It really engages the mind. It engages the imagination of the listeners better than, a visual medium like television or cinema, where a lot of the information is given to you. A lot of the visual information is given to you. So, this kind of story is a natural fit for audio. It allowed us to delve in much deeper. We sort of turned into journalists in order to really get the story. And if we were stuck in a visual medium, the pressures of a visual medium wouldn't have allowed us to allow the story to incubate the way it did and to sort of present to the audience a fully realized story.
Once again, talking to our two special guests today, Menelek Lumumba and also Hans Charles, the hosts and creators of the podcast, The A Building. I want to swing back over to you, Menelek. When you look at your background, being writer and director of One Angry Black Man, this also explored Black collegiate experiences. How did that experience help you kind of formulate your approach to co-creating this podcast, especially blending the firsthand testimonies with the archival research?
Well, I mean, what was important for this story to work is that it had to really have kind of a functioning narrative, right? I think any effective documentary story, you can kind of sum up the story rather succinctly, right? And so my background as a screenwriter, as a director, is okay, what's the story? And you have to be able to explain it succinctly. The story of this was very, very immediate and obvious right away. What wasn't clear as we dug deeper into it and got more into the research was just how relevant the events that were taking place in 1969 would actually be mirroring what's happening in society right now. And I think that was a revelation to both of us. And it was also so helpful to sit down and speak to Black folks from that generation, that to talk about what they saw and to It was also interesting to see how hesitant a lot of them were to speak about it. You know, the ratio of people we reached out to versus the people that said yes, primarily because I think it's still traumatic to a lot of people. You know, it's not something they enjoy talking about. So that, as a storyteller, that in itself is another layer of, okay, what's that about? It gives you another thread to unravel. And I think that's at the core of this story, is that, okay, what happens when you decide to literally put your life on the line for a belief? Like, I believe this so much, I'll die for it. And that's what an entire generation of people were inspired by, the lives of Malcolm X and Dr. King and endless activists that aren't as famous as those two men. That was at the core of this story.
And also, Hans, when you look at the historical context, these stories matter, and it's important for them to live on and to be told. When you look at the lasting changes that came from these events regarding students' actions, bringing more change with the curriculum and student life, what do you hope that listeners will appreciate from these stories and also take away with them?
I mean, I think it's like two things. For me, I love for people to have a context for the conditions that people were resisting in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I feel like sometimes we romanticize this period as that's when people had conviction and that's when people knew what they were doing. No, these conditions were very difficult. People suffered. There were consequences for what they did. And you could learn, you could not be in despair if you look back at what they did rather than chastise yourself for not being, as heroic or as not being pure in ideology. It's a roadmap. It gives you an idea of what you can do within the modern context. Things are different. The conditions are different. The sort of the gravity, the antagonist that we're facing is different today than it was at that time period. So what are the tools that we have that are different? What are the societal norms that are occurring that are different that we can use to our advantage? So I like to look at history to help me see the roadmap ahead, and that's one of the sort of takeaways I hope that an audience has.
And also, lastly, for you, Menelek, same question, similar. How do you see the 1969 events kind of mirroring what is going on in recent movements?
Well, I mean, I think at the core of it, particularly looking at how personal those students at Morehouse took the death of MLK, that Martin Luther King was an Atlanta man, he was a Morehouse man, and the trauma of that kind of galvanized everyone. And I think what you're seeing today, if it's student protests in Gaza, if it was the George Floyd uprising, if what you're seeing in Minnesota in response to ICE and various ICE protests around the country, is that you're seeing people that actually believe in the fundamental principles in America, more so than even the government itself, and are prepared to actually put their lives in danger physically, in terms of employment, in terms of finances. And like we have a guy that we interviewed, his name is James Early, who he was 6 months away from graduation, and he climbed a tree to go into the boardroom. And I asked him, I said, were you worried about any consequence? And he said no, because it was the moment. He saw the moment, he sees the moment, and here he is, 80 years old. He has no regret about it at all. It's a bravery you can't even wrap your head around. And I think these are the stories that can motivate, inspire, and perhaps give hope to people today, especially when they feel hopeless.
Once again, talking to two special guests this morning, Menelek Lumumba and also Hans Charles, the hosts and creators of the podcast, The A Building. You can get it wherever you get podcasts. I will suggest you put this on your list. I want to thank you both for your amazing time this morning and say, appreciate what you do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.